The year is 1806. A young woman stands on the wind-scoured shores of the Orkney Islands, staring at a future she did not choose. Across the ocean, another woman tightens her grip on a birch-bark canoe as the wilderness of Quebec opens before her, vast and unforgiving. A century later, in 1885, a dissatisfied schoolteacher buys a rifle, and in that single audacious act, rewrites the course of her life. History remembers the men who blazed trails, but the truth is, courageous women carved paths every bit as daring, every bit as wild. Tonight, we meet the woman who brings those forgotten stories roaring back to life.
This is Doyle. You're listening to Spirit Talk Show, Bedtime Stories for Grown-Ups, where the past breeds and the present deepens and storytelling becomes a place of illumination. My guest today is someone who has spent a lifetime exploring inner worlds and outer adventures of women who refuse to stay put. Cinda Gault is an acclaimed author of Everything I Hoped For, A Small Compass, and This Godforsaken Place, 3 sweeping historical novels about fierce, complicated, tenacious women determined to live fully. Whether in the Orkney Islands or the Canadian frontier, the Wild West of 1880s or the turbulent 1970s. Her background is as remarkable as her characters. Psychology, criminology, prison work, a PhD analyzing Canadian women's writing, and a career spent lifting up voices history tried. Her fiction bridges wilderness and city streets, myth and grit, research and intuition, always returning to the heartbeat of women's life. We open the door to her world and the legends behind her novel, the question of what survives history and what doesn't, and the real women who stepped into danger long before anyone was ready to write them down. We'll hear excerpts from her books, long enough to savor, short enough to make you lean forward, and we'll talk about how she chooses the women she resurrects, why she writes historical fiction, and what the story she's burning to tell next. So settle in, let the wind of Orkney and the hush of the Quebec wilderness and the sharp crack of a rifle in the 1880s pull you under. Because tonight, we're stepping into the lives of women who did not wait to be invited into history. They marched straight into it. Hello, Cinda, how are you? Is it Cinda? Cinda?
It's Cinda, yes.
Cinda, okay, wait, hello. Well, I am in this.
Hello.
I have some co-hosts today. I'm in this studio with Howie, is right here, and we've got Russ is with us also, right? So he's.
Okay. Hello.
Okay. But looky for you, you only get to see my face. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming. You have. Let's see. We were reading about your book just before we came on. Can you tell us about how this work got started? And because I know that you have connection with Nova Scotia. Is that right? Nova Scotia? No, not Nova Scotia.
The Orkney.
Quebec. Is it Quebec?
Well, in the novel A Small Compass, I have 2 protagonists, and one comes from the Orkneys in Scotland, and the other one comes from Masquinongé, Quebec.
Okay.
That's where they come from. I'm from Toronto.
Okay, it's funny because we had a guest we interviewed two weeks ago who wrote about like Quebec, like folklore, and he was an author too. And I thought, and he lived in Toronto too. So you're like my second guest in 2 weeks from Toronto, writing about characters from. So, great. So I see that you've done how did you get started on this book? Like, is it something that was a life passion that you researched over, or is it?
In which book are you asking about? A Small Compass?
Yeah, I'm talking. Sorry.
Okay, my most recent book is Everything I Hoped For, and that was set in Toronto in the 70s. And then A Small Compass is 1806 it was set in, and that started in the Orkneys and wound up over here. So that was the one before the current one. And then the one before that was called This Godforsaken Place, and that was set in 1885 in Canada with the Louis Riel Rebellion in the background.
Okay, and the one that you just recently released, or the most recent released one, is the Small Compass, right?
No,
sorry,
Everything I Hoped For.
Everything I Hoped For. Sorry,
yeah.
Russ is listening. Yeah. I guess I'm trying to navigate the document.
Set in Toronto in the 70s.
Hey,
that's right.
He's not really here. I'm just throwing my voice. Okay. So when you look back at your life, you worked in psychology and criminology and prison work and academia writing. So what are the threads that tie it all together for you?
Okay, well, that's a story. I've always loved school. So reading and writing were always a big part of my life. And even though I had a fairly tumultuous adolescence, I still knew that school was in my future and that's where I was going to go. So I just followed my interests. And that led me to the University of Guelph in the 70s. And I was one of those young feminists running around setting up rape crisis centers and shelters for victims of domestic violence. And I was together with a group of women. We set up a university club called Women in Crisis, and we set up a distress line for victims of sexual assault. And I was hired as the first director to set up the shelter, which I did, and apparently is still going today. And I did, when that was completed, I decided I had worked with victims for, all my time up to this time, and I wanted to go check out some perpetrators. So I became a prison guard at the and in a maximum security wing where they housed inmates convicted of sexual assault or arson or had mental or emotional problems. And when I finished that, I went down to U of T and did my MA in criminology and did my thesis on domestic violence. And I got my dream job of a director of a social service agency, and I hated it. I hit a brick wall with it. I hated it. I realized I do not like managing other people. I do not like it that when it's my job to have to make sure that other people do their jobs. It seems like being a mummy, and it's a mummy to people who aren't cute enough to warrant a mummy. So I had to make a decision. What was I going to do that would be so deeply meaningful to me that I would put up with whatever I needed to put up with to pursue it? And that's when I decided I would become a writer. Now, there's more to the story than that, but I don't want to go on and on if you just asked a simple question.
Well, it seems like, and I think you maybe are one, you write about like tenacious women who claim their adventures. So when did you realize that you are one of these women?
Oh, I've always known that.
Okay.
I was a tenacious girl.
Okay, clean and concise. I don't know if Russ or Howie wanted to ask a question here. They do? Okay. Wow. Thank you guys for being here. I appreciate your help. Okay. So
No problem.
No problem. Thank you. They were going to ask questions, but I guess look at you.
I should be able to see them. Can you introduce me to just see the other two guys?
That's Russ.
Hello.
And that's Howie.
Hi.
Just see,
hi, Howie.
Okay. Now you can see why you're lucky you only see my face. Okay.
I see.
Okay.
Well, if we run out of other things, I can go into how my grandfather was murdered by someone from Quebec. So.
Oh, wow. So, that's not... Okay, well, let's bring it up. But maybe he was in the prison she worked in.
So how long were you a prison guard?
13 months.
Oh, okay.
Oh, so it's not like... I worked in a prison, Folsom prison, for 2.5 years. So I know the community, I know the environment, and I don't think people know that the little things you don't expect. And it does feel... You are in a high level of tension all day, so I didn't like that.
Well, this sounds more... I mean, I'm assuming that was a federal prison?
It was a state...
that was Johnny Cash's prison, wasn't
California State per prison, yeah.
Okay. Well, I was in a provincial institution, so that would be similar. So everyone that I had anything to do with was in for 2 years less a day. There wasn't anybody in for a longer sentence than that.
Okay.
I don't know if that was the case at your prison.
Okay, well, I mean, I think Folsom Prison was pretty much, it was jokingly called a retirement prison because it's where all the people who were, they're in for life, but they've already been in 40 years, and so it's old guys who's just there. It's just kind of like, it was jokingly called the retirement per prison because it was pretty true.
Right.
Like that. So you've lived inside these heavy subjects, domestic violence, incarceration, identity, like women's history. So, like, what has given you that you, like, really... Sorry, like, what... sorry, I messed up. What has given you about these... I'm sorry, let's see. Go ahead.
While Trevor collects himself, I'll ask the depressing question. Do you think the domestic violence and sexual violence against women better, worse?
today.
I mean, in the last, there's 50 years later. Have we?
Yeah, well, and this is the thing. This is 50 years later. I'm out of this loop, so I don't know. I went off in a different direction when I decided I wanted to become a writer. Part of doing that was going back to school in English instead of social sciences, because I needed to know my new industry that I was going into. And it's a completely different kind of writing, of course, because if in a psychology, anything you would write in psychology, you would start with your thesis statement. And if you did that in fiction, you'd know who'd done it on the first page. So it was just a completely different history, a completely different kind of writing that I felt that I needed to go and learn. So I went and did another MA, this time in English. And then I caught fire with that and went through to do a PhD. And my thesis for that PhD was analyzing three female Canadian writers who came to publishing prominence in the years 1965 to 1980. And those were Margaret Lawrence, Margaret Atwood, and Marian Engel. And I chose those years, which I call the identity years, because that was the time when in Canada we had the second wave movement, the same as the States. I'm assuming you're in the States, are you?
We're in California in the States, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so that was the second wave feminist movement, which was the same all over North America and in Europe. But in Canada, we also had a period where our Prime Minister was Pierre Trudeau. And Canada was having a time of kind of a feel-good sense of nationalism. People thought Canada was cool, and they wanted to know about it, and they went traveling all through it to explore it, and had a sense that being Canadian was something that you could discover about yourself, and being female was something you could discover about yourself as well. So those were the two dominant social movements of the time. And so I was looking at how those identities were represented in the work of these women writers. So that's where my head was for all of that time.
Okay.
I was out of the business of domestic violence after I finished my MA in criminology. So I'm not up to date on anything now. My sense is that the culture, our culture, has been convinced that you don't do that to women. A lot has changed for women in the last 50 years, and women are in a far more equal and powerful position now than they were back then. However, there are still, if you were to have 100 people who were guilty of something violent, I would still say probably 99 of them are men.
Yeah.
So, that's the way that breaks. But I think as far as our society is concerned, it has bent over backwards to try to make things equal.
So regarding that, and I know that, I am male, and like 99%, it seems like how am I like an ally to these people? Because it feels like if I enter the car conversation, a middle-aged white male, I'm seen as the enemy right away. And so I step back. I believe in equality 100% across the board, but it seems like I don't know how to always be an ally in a way that I'm accepted, in a way that I'm not treated as the enemy, right?
Well, this is where I'm old-fashioned now, because I don't see you as the enemy. I have been in a committed relationship for 49 years with a white male, and I have two sons who are heroes as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
And
awesome.
they just had a daughter each 2 years ago. They're only 3.5 months apart, so I feel like I have twins.
Wow.
As a grandmother. So I have brought up boys, and I am now going to be part of bringing up girls. And I do not see, and I never have seen men as the enemy. I found during the year, and this is where second wave is different from what came after, because there seems to have been a shift. When we were running around doing our feminist thing, what we had to say was just get out of our way. You don't have to do anything for me. Just don't tell me I can't have this job, or I can't open a bank account, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. Just get out of my way. I'll take my own risks. You don't have to do anything for me other than just let me loose. And that makes an awful lot of sense to me. But what I have noticed over the years is there has come this sense of it's society's responsibility to take care of women so that they don't have to suffer the consequences of taking any risks. And I am personally quite uncomfortable about that because it sounds Victorian to me. It sounds like you'd need a chaperone or something. But we were just, we did not think it was someone else's job to take care of us. And I still don't, and I won't teach my granddaughters that either. I'll send them to Krav Maga.
Well, I think there's things still in our culture which seem to be holdovers to when women considered that they need to be, like, even long hair to me seems like it takes a lot of work to look after long hair, but I think some women feel like they're required to have long hair, or that's what women do, and that feels like a holdover. Like, you feel that you have to have your appearance a certain way for men, right? That seems like that's a little bit of a archaic.
It's funny because I have never felt that way. First of all, with the whole idea of makeup and hair and that sort of thing, I have never felt oppressed by doing that, and I've never done it for men. Women are more likely to notice what you've done with your makeup than men are.
Oh yeah.
So it's not, and it's something that is part and parcel of this idea of taking responsibility for yourself. If you're, with freedom comes responsibility, and it seems to me you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't say I want to take whatever risks I decide to take, and then turn around and say that it's somebody else's responsibility to protect me. That's not the way that I have ever looked at it. So you don't have to do anything. As a woman, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do, as long as you're prepared to take the consequences. And that's why I write about the women that I write about in these historical stories, because they were in circumstances that were far less, pliant than now, and they still found a way to lead a meaningful life to them. And I find them inspiring in that way. But I don't feel, I have loved being a woman. I have not felt at all that I am behind the eight ball. And I know from bringing up boys that men are more constricted in what they're, what is socially acceptable for them to do and to express. Well, in choosing kids' names.
Yeah.
When we didn't know if we were having a boy or a girl for our first one, we had a great long list of girls' names, and it was much more strategic to pick a boy's name. So the constrictions go both ways now, but women are more vulnerable physically, and reproductively.
Well, I'm glad to hear you're teaching your granddaughters to use their elbows and knees. Krav Maga is excellent for close combat.
Well, yes, and I understand that they have to be 6 before I can take them.
Well, I have I have 2 boys myself, and so I understand. I have great boys, and I think they're heroes too. But let's go back to your work a little bit. So there's so many women in history. I think there's so many achievements in history that women had significant influence in that we don't know about, like the light bulb, the car, everything. So how do you choose which forgotten women deserve resurrection in your work?
Well, my training in my PhD was as a Canadianist, so I was familiar with Canadian fiction and Canadian history. And the way I came to the novel that you mentioned, A Small Compass, which is the one where one of the protagonists is from the Orkney Islands and the other one is from Masquinongé, Quebec. I had been researching for my first novel, This Godforsaken Place, which was in 1885, and I came across a journal from earlier in that century that had been kept by the head of a fur trading post for the Northwest Company. And there was an asterisk in his journal entry, and down at the bottom of the page, he said, "An extraordinary thing happened tonight." He said an Orkney lad, and the Orkney lad just means that's where the Hudson's Bay hired their employees. They sent a ship over to Stromness in the Orkney Islands each year and hired their cohort of employees and took them back to the fur trade in Canada. That's what he means when he says an Orkney lad. An Orkney lad just gave birth on the hearth of the fur trading company. So that's how. So when I read that, I thought, "Oh my God, that's a story just begging to be told." How, obviously they didn't know this person was a woman, and she was outed by having a baby. So I ran out and tried to find out who she was, and I discovered she was Isabel Gunn. And to my dismay, another writer had beaten me to the punch and had already written a novel about her. So I went and got the novel, and I read it, and I was just struck by how differently I conceived of the story compared to this other writer, because there are only certain things that can come down through history. What do you know about your great-great-great-grandparents beyond when they were born, when they got married, when they had children, when they died? That's pretty much what we know about them. But, what were their hopes, their dreams, their disappointments, their secrets? All of that is the stuff of fiction, and you breathe that in as a writer. So I decided that I would write her story in the way that I saw it. And then along the way, I discovered, when I started focusing in and researching at this time, that there was another woman, and she was from Masquinongé, Quebec, a different kind of woman in the sense that she was from a small village in Quebec, and she had grown up as a farmer's daughter, but her father died, and her mother remarried a merchant in the village. So she got off the farm, and she was not going back to the farm. So she, by all accounts, she was drop dead gorgeous, and everybody had proposed to her, and she was not going to go and be a farmer's wife. So this coeur de bois blows into town, probably in a sexy leather fringe jacket, talking about his adventures out west. And she fell madly in love with him, and they got married really quickly. And then he discovered that he had come back with 7 years' pay, and he wanted to buy a farm, and he couldn't because nobody was selling their farms, because in the meantime, Bonaparte had started a war, and the wood to make ships had become so lucrative that people were selling the wood off their land rather than selling the land. So he would have had to go and clear bush, which would take 5 years before he could even plant anything. Yeah. And he was already older because he had been away for 7 years, and she was probably pregnant by now. So when I discovered her, and then he had to go back out west because he couldn't stay, and she said, "Okay, bud, you take me, or you'll never see me or your kid again." So she became the first passenger paddled by the voyageurs out west. And as I researched, I discovered that both these women wound up in the same place, which is Pembina, which was North Dakota then. It's Canada then, it's North Dakota now. It changed with the Jay Treaty and other treaties around that time. And they wound up as the first two white women who went out into the Canadian wilderness. And they were there at the same time, spitting distance from each other. They were across the very small Pembina River at different fur trading posts. And they had their babies within a week of each other. And there's no record of them ever having met. So that was the story I was going to tell. I was going to have them meet. So, by this time, you can see that I am honed in on individual stories. I'm not in social sciences anymore, looking at the state of women in the universe now. I was looking at these particular women and finding it very inspiring what they decided to do and were determined to do.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So that's how I came to write that story.
So
do you feel there are any misconceptions about women's history that are you compelled to correct any misconceptions about women's history?
I'm not. I'm not an activist anymore. When I was back then, it was because I was learning that there were things that needed to change for me and for women of my generation. That we needed to have as far as rights and freedoms. So that I would do speaking engagements on that then as a representative of Women in Crisis. But that's not who I am anymore. I still, of course, like you, think women are equal and should be equal. But it's not my job as a writer to go out and try to change the world. I'm telling stories that I care about. I'm not telling them because I think there's some problem with women's stories necessarily, even though there might be. I'm telling them because I just think they're fascinating stories.
Yeah. Stumble over this sort of interesting nugget and then dig into it.
And then say, wow, she sounds interesting. Her life sounds interesting. I want to know more about it, and I want to bring it to life on the page.
Right. And she happens to be a woman.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
like, I grew up in Ireland, and I remember, like, we think of these, like women in history as ancient stories, but they're really not, because in the 90s in Ireland, women couldn't divorce, and then if you divorced, you were left destitute because there was no legal right to anything afterwards.
Yeah.
And that was happening up until, there was no divorce in Ireland, I think, until early 2000s, maybe, something crazy like that, and women. So I don't think these are even ancient stories. I know you wrote these stories about like hundreds of years ago and stuff.
19th Amendment in the United States was only 1920. I mean, it's barely 100 years ago.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
so
Now, in Ireland, of course, it's all about the Catholic Church. That is what determines. A book that I'm going to be publishing next year is going to be called Abortion in Canadian Literature. And what I have done is analyzed a number of different authors who have written novels that feature abortions in them, and analyzed them for what the cultural underpinnings are for the way Canadians look at the issue of abortion. And in so doing, I was researching Ireland in particular as well, because they have been very late to the party as far as decriminalizing things. And the Americans, of course, look at it in a much more religious way. Yeah. But Canada is unique because we're the only Western country that does not have an abortion law. And that is because Dr. Henry Morgentaler brought the nation to its knees about it. And the Supreme Court knocked down the abortion law in 1988. So we just haven't had one since then, and there isn't an appetite in this country to figure out how to put one back in. And I have come to the conclusion from my research that different countries look at these issues differently. That it's very, very Catholic view of abortion in Ireland. Yeah. In Canada, it's more almost multicultural. Because, and this again is just my theory, Canada as a country and as a culture has been split at the root from the beginning. Because basically the French and the English were at war forever. And they came over here and continued their war, and the British won. And when they won, they said, okay, now let's be friends. And we'll run things, and you just go and do whatever you want to do, and we'll just have a country. So with that, and it's a different culture, it's a different language, and I think Canada learned, back off, don't tell me who I am or what my culture is or what my values are or whatever. So Canadians have kind of grown into this feeling that they shouldn't be telling other people what to do.
Well, okay. Well, I think it's great. My brain can't get over the fact that you called it late to the party, like you called it a party, but I'm joking. But I know you didn't intend anything by that. So I know. So we, this is a storytelling podcast, and I know you brought some pieces to read, but we also have a story we wrote about you. We did some research, and we delved into your website, and we wrote a tribute story. So what we can do is we can read your tribute story first. Now, your option is you can read it if you want, or you can hear the velvet voices of one of these guys. Maybe Russ would like to read it to you. So if you'd like your tribute story to be read to you by the velvet voice of Russ Parker, then we can do that. Or you can read it. I can share the screen. And then we can...
I think a velvet voice sounds great.
Okay, so can you do the velvet voice?
I can try.
Okay.
Just don't ask for a furry contralto.
Is that as good as it gets? Okay. Okay, so this is your tribute story.
Wow.
Okay. So... The Women Who Would Not Wait. There's a quiet street in Toronto where the past still knows Cinda Gault's name. It's a place where she walks in the early morning, long before the city remembers itself and the story she carries. Centuries old, windswept, and stitched with grit of forgotten women rise up around her like old companions. She never goes out looking for them. They find her. Sometimes it begins with a scent, wood smoke, the tang of northern pine, or a whisper of snow blowing across the prairies. Sometimes it's a scrap of history buried in a footnote, the kind of line most readers skim past. But Cinda pauses, she leans in, she listens. Because she knows a secret. History is not a procession of great men. History is a long corridor filled with women whose names were never written down. Women who paddled canoes through the icy veins of the Canadian wilderness, women who followed their husbands into danger and discovered, in the wild silence, the text moved, that they carried a courage entirely their own. Women who stared down the dull expectations of marriage, propriety, and good sense, and one day, sometimes without warning, bought a rifle or boarded a ship, or stepped into a life no one believed they could claim. Isabel, Marie Anne, Abigail, Belinda. Each one a story waiting, patient as snow, until Cinda arrived to give it breath. In her world, the Orkney Islands are close enough to smell the sea brine. Montreal flickers with the lantern light of fur traders. A young woman in the 1970s stands at the crossroads of faith, rebellion, and her own restless longing. And the American Wild West hums with danger, the echo of rifle shots, and the fierce pulse of a woman stepping beyond her tamest self. Cinda's gift is not simply research, it is resurrection. She walks the wilderness with them. She kneels beside their campfires. She climbs into the saddle with women who rode into storms and into the hearts of men who underestimated them. She slips into the pages of their lives until the world can hear them again, loudly, clearly, beautifully alive. Her novels do not just portray history, they correct it. They remind us that women have always been adventurers, braving seas, nations, heartbreaks, and their own quiet revolutions. They remind us that courage did not begin in the 20th century, and defiance was not invented on social media. It lived in the hands of women who chopped wood, paddled rivers, and kept journals no one ever meant to publish. And somewhere in Toronto, before the sun fully rises, Cinda closes her notebook and smiles. Another woman has stepped out of history and into the light. Another life is whole again, because Cinda Gault was there to listen.
Okay.
That's lovely.
That's your tribute.
That's lovely. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's very very powerful. It's like you're like a superhero saving these women from obscurity. That they, because we all know in our heart, we all know our mothers and our that there's so much that moms do behind the scenes and have done for that has been like disregarded in history and stuff. And I'm glad that someone's like bringing it forth, right? That's important work. So you had said you were going to bring some pieces yourself to read. Is this a time you'd like to read one of your pieces?
Okay. You said 3 to 5 minutes as much as 7, so yeah. I've respected those parameters. And I have 2 readings from Everything I Hope For, which is the one in the 70s. And I have another one, if you want it, that is from A Small Compass. So you decide on how much you want. But the first one here, it's 5.5 minutes. And it is early in the novel, and it's very important to understand the context of the 1970s for this novel. It was a time of real social disruption. In Canada, we had the Divorce Act in 1968, and it made it much easier to get divorced. And apparently there was a real pent-up need to get divorced because the divorce rate soared, and they soared right through the 70s before they started coming down again. So this was a time of quite a bit of social disruption as far as family experiences. And what is happening here is Belinda Pompey, the protagonist, is walking into this world as she comes of age herself. So she is having to navigate this as she does. She grows up, falls in love, has to figure out who she is and what she wants, all of that sort of stuff that we all have to do. This is the context in which she does that. So it is in a time of relationship breakdown. So this is kind of the parental generation that we're going to meet here. And then the second thing I'm going to read you will be later in the novel.
Okay.
So shall I start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Not long ago, instead of dishes in the sink, there would have been a roast in the oven, infusing the house with promise. Their home was once not only warm, but beautiful. Her mother sewed matching plaid bedspreads for her brothers, a life-affirming orange quilted one for the master bedroom, and red and white gingham for her. A sophisticated olive carpet ran under the living room coffee table and hi-fi stereo, with armchairs upholstered in blue velvet, an artistic choice, facing a black and white patterned couch. 3 steps down took you to a back-split family room, rimmed with windows and an expansive fireplace. They once kept the back vestibule stacked with logs in the days when her father maintained an ice rink in the yard. Belinda believed that anyone seeing her mother at the wine store could be forgiven for jumping to the conclusion that Megan Pompey was a bored housewife working to fill the time left by children gone off to school. She was a beautiful woman. At 42, she could pass for 32. She always said her secret was the ability to keep up with the times. All through the 1960s, she'd done leg lifts and sit-ups on the living room floor in the mornings with Jack LaLanne on television. Now, in 1972, she was proud to be the mother of teenagers who still saw her as young. She wore blue eyeshadow like models in all the fashion magazines, emphasizing her already dramatic blue eyes, and drew her eyeliner boldly beyond her eyelids for a lifting effect. She bought clothes for her kids they would actually wear, neon flower power colors and T-shirts with the graphic of Jimi Hendrix. She took care to make sure their bell-bottom jeans hung almost to the ground, as was the style, even if the material might fray from sometimes dragging on the ground. She herself wore high-heeled boots, a pencil skirt, and a silky blouse, not the sort of clothing a retail sales clerk would have collected over years of pinching pennies. Staying young wasn't just looking young. Being flexible and open to new experiences was just as important. She could sing the words to Beatles songs on the radio. It was hard to believe that despite all her efforts and how successful she had been at staying young, Megan Pompey saw her life as a resolute march of disappointments. No one outside the family would ever guess the venom she nursed. Those inside her household suffered through her bitterness about the hand she'd been dealt. She'd earned the right to play tennis every afternoon, but instead found herself hauling groceries home at the end of each workday. The next afternoon, the heat was on in the house when Belinda pushed open the front door. Only after she had deposited her books in her room, let the dog out, and returned to the kitchen to turn on the light, did she see her father sitting in one of the living room chairs. "Dad," she said as she turned on the lamp, "what are you doing in the dark?" He looked up as though confused to see her. "I got home from work a little while ago. I didn't realize it was getting dark." "What's happening, Dad? Mum said you're putting the house up for sale." "She wanted me to sign over the house. The first 2 lawyers wouldn't do it. Yesterday she found one who would." "Why did you sign?" He took his glasses off and squeezed his eyes. "She wasn't going to stop until she got it." "By the way, she's gone away for the weekend with Isabel." He put his glasses back on and looked out the window. "She's been doing that a lot lately," Belinda said. He nodded to the window as though conceding a point. Belinda had been worried about her dad for a while. As the boy who would be rich had aged, he had sunk steadily into a bog of debt, sold his business at the brink of bankruptcy, and in contradistinction to her mother's resentment, felt nothing more than the relief of having broken even. One of her mother's 5 sisters made her husband get Dad a job at the counter of a Liquor Control Board of Ontario outlet, where it was said elephants went to die, and get her mother a job as a clerk in a wine store. Now, no one was at home to keep track of their 3 teenage children. These days he wafted around in a world he no longer understood, like the night he and her mother took Belinda to the stage play Hair for her 16th birthday. He wondered aloud in his seat what had happened to real talent. Or the next year when Megan made him take Belinda to the concert movie Woodstock that drove him out to the theater's lobby after a few minutes to outwait the rest. All that electric screeching was the sound of a generation that couldn't play more than 3 chords on a guitar. He mourned the melodies of Glenn Miller, Artie Shaw, Ray Anthony, and Woody Herman, real musicians no one had heard of anymore. Suddenly an alien on his own planet, he picked his way through the remnants of every decision he'd ever made. "Does Tyler have a game tonight?" Belinda asked. "Is James going with you?" He nodded absently. I'll make you sandwiches. You can eat them on the way. That would be nice, Lynn. Once they left, she'd have one of those delicious evenings with the house all to herself. She could turn up the stereo and dance around the living room to Led Zeppelin until she exhausted herself. Then she'd make tea and settle in on the couch to read a separate piece, her next novel about other people's sadness and problems. It was inspiring to watch human beings find the fortitude to cope.
Wow, very nice.
That's near...
Go ahead, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sorry. I was just going to say that's near the beginning of the novel. That's kind of what she has walked into at that time in her life.
Because you described her as having this like pretty normal life, but then she had a lot of passion in her. And you said anger. Was it anger you said, or rage?
This was the mother, the venom she felt. Now, she was of the generation of women who, like the Betty Friedan generation, who wrote The Feminine Mystique and kind of kicked off the second wave feminist movement. These were housewives of the 50s that were very resentful. What was open to them was being a wife and a mother. That was what most middle-class families had, the mother at home taking care of the kids and the father going out to work. And what that did was really constrain how women could succeed or compete, or all the things that you would do out in a public world. They could only do through their husbands. Yeah. So there was the sense that her job was to stay young and beautiful and take care of the kids, and his job was supposed to bring the bacon home, and he was running into financial difficulties, and so she felt very bitter that he didn't keep up with his end of the bargain.
So it makes me think about my own mother, and of course I'm glad that she chose to be a mom, but I always felt like she would have loved to have been a traveler or did some career, but she lived in Western Ireland, and she was born in the 40s, and women were supposed to go in the 60s and meet a man and pump out boys. I'm glad she did, but she had 4 sons and 2 daughters, but I kind of always felt like she would have loved to have been a career woman, and I think she knew it herself. Right. So, and countless women, I'm sure, in history have done that same path, right? It looks like you wanted to ask a question.
But the thing is, in this era, it is a very exciting era for women, because you have them able to go into jobs they never went into before. You had women going to work in droves. They went to post-secondary education in droves. You had the pill was mass-produced, so women, for the first time, had autonomy over the reproductive systems. And then you had Henry Morgentaler making it so that if that didn't work, you still were in charge of your own body. Mm-hmm. So this is the generation before women were getting that kind of freedom. And so there was a sense of having been ripped off, that they did everything that they were supposed to do. It didn't work out for them the way it was supposed to. And now everything had changed, and the young women today could have anything they wanted.
Okay, wow. And you have I'm glad that we're moving in the direction of people being able to pursue what they really want and dream for. You know, I mean, it makes me sad. So you said you had another piece that was later in your book that you wanted to read also?
Yes, this one's 4.5 minutes, and it is we meet the protagonist in this one. And the theme is still a relationship breakdown, but this time it's her relationship that's breaking down. And it is pretty much the moment of decision when she decides that she's going to leave. And I don't want to get too English teachery about it, but there is the confusion of the breakdown is metaphoric in the snow at the time, where there's the obscurity, you can't see through a blizzard. And by the time she comes out of it, the trajectory has been reversed. It's clear, it's sunny, and the orbit has completely changed as far as the trajectory of her life.
And this one's also from Everything I Hope For?
Yes,
okay.
It is. There will be allusions to things that you won't understand because it's later in the book and you would have had to have kind of lived through them. But this is her relationship breakdown. The caravan of snow equipment on the road ahead of them crawled behind a monstrous lead vehicle, sucking up snow and blowing it into the dump truck behind. Once the truck was heaped full of snow, it veered off to let the empty truck next in line take its place. Cars trailing behind were treated to a salted trail to the city limits, beyond which roads deteriorated into whiteouts. The roads through farm country were generally built high and dry to let snow blow across them and lodge in the stubble of harvested fields. This year's snowfall had brought the snow up to the level of the roads, so that drifts had started to form across them. Worse, a darkening landscape made it impossible to recognize markers that signaled the turns they should take. They couldn't even tell when the car was venturing onto the shoulder of the road. After 2 hours of squinting at what looked like static on a television screen, snow scraped along the undercarriage. It brought the car to a halt in a tunnel of white. The gear shift treated reverse, neutral, drive, and park as identical. "We have to be within a couple of miles of home," John said. 10 feet out, we wouldn't know where we were. "We have enough gas so we won't freeze," he offered. "We have no idea how long we'll be here. It might be an idea to keep turning off the car to conserve gas. In the morning, we'll know where we are." They slept in fits as the hours ground by, sometimes both simultaneously. Belinda thought she smelled gas a few times and worried they might be asphyxiated if the fumes from idling had nowhere to escape if buried in the snow. John said he didn't smell any fumes. The exhaust pipe would likely be warm enough to melt the snow around it. Still, every time she awoke, it was with a start, and then the memory of the disaster upon them flooded back. With the car started and the heat blowing, the smell subsided, but back it would come when they sat trapped and cold with the white monster still rampaging around them. "I thought I could do this," John said. Thinking he was talking about venturing into bad road conditions, she shouldered her part of the blame. "My exam in Guelph made us leave too late. I don't even look in the newspapers anymore. I don't even call when there's an ad." "Why not?" she asked. "I don't know." "I don't understand the problem," she said. "You know what you need to do. You've done it before." "I think about it every day until I can't stand thinking about it anymore. I thought we would do this dog thing together," he said. "John, I've been living on a farm and commuting an hour more each way to help make it work for you," she said. "What more do you want?" "I don't know." They were stranded like astronauts, unable to move backwards or forwards, watching their breath hang in the capsule. Looking through the windows were the faces of her mother, father, brothers, and Carol, silent, more real to her now than the ghost beside her, who seemed to dissolve while staring at the steering wheel. She was sure her hand would pass right through him if she reached out to touch his pallid face, almost luminous in the dark. They'd all expected her to come to this point, marooned, without bearings. A brightening of the sky was their first inkling the storm had passed. Sunshine intensified until its reflection on the snow forced them to squint. It was evident now that the road had dipped into a gully of drifted snow. 20 yards ahead, a hill rose, windswept and perfectly clear up an incline. Pete's truck appeared, a mirage on the crest of the horizon. They watched as he waved and then dug a path to the front of their car to affix a chain and motioned for John to place the vehicle in neutral. Pete pulled them up slowly into a strange new world, where the light was different, clarified, and the orbit had somehow reversed itself. Foreboding may well be the most insidious experience of misfortune. Precious time is lost in wanting things to be otherwise. Hope hides, disaster illuminates. When the ship really is sinking, the building burning, the tsunami dark on the horizon, if you are blessed with any time at all, you make a choice. So that's the end of that.
It made me think of like they were trapped in the car, and that's it. Like, is it like a metaphor to how women are trapped in their worlds and societies often that they don't have control and power over.
Well, you could make that extrapolation, but
I think they're both trapped.
I guess as a writer, I am really focused on the individuals.
Yeah.
You know, there's lots in the setting of this book about, you know, women feeling trapped in different ways and wanting out. But in this particular scene, this is when the disappointment she has in the other character has broken something.
And it sounds like he's been like hasn't been working and has been looking for work and then given up.
Yes, and even, I don't want to give too much away from the novel, but he's actually found his dream. He all through it, he was saying that he wanted to breed Old English sheepdogs. And so here they are on a farm, they're breeding Old English sheepdogs. He needs to be getting new stock after they have litters. It's working, and he just drops the ball and doesn't do anything about it. So she's been as supportive as she possibly can be through the story, and at some point she just gives up on him. And this is the moment when she does. So it's not as if she's going to university, she's doing everything she wants to do. She's outstripping him at this point. So she doesn't feel like a trapped housewife at all, but she is in a relationship with somebody she has lost respect for.
Mm.
Well, and there's sort of a despair in in what you read from him, sort of seeing that gap widening and that he's not moving at the same sort of velocity, and that's just sort of
exactly growing. And he doesn't know why any more than she does. You know, when you are in a relationship, I mean, a couple relationship is going to be the most intense, but really any relationships, you learn about each other as you show up for each other. You know, you learn about people through their actions, and they can tell you anything and they can believe it themselves. But over the long haul, the way people behave tells you everything about them. And so she is learning all the way through this story. She is learning how to understand the world she's in and the life that she's creating for herself.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, you know, it doesn't matter how people, like, actions is a demonstration of your behavior and not your words, right? So it's what you do. That's
your integrity.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're walking your own talk.
Yeah. So I dumped this question on you. I always like to surprise my guests with this question. So if you have a message for like young people, I'm talking about 20 to 40, what's the message that like Cinda Gault wants to give the world?
Well, I don't have advice kind of message to give anybody beyond, you know, if you are beyond don't listen to other people. You know, in 50 years ago, you were being told what to do. And I think women especially were told what to do because everybody thought they needed to protect them. Yeah. And so it would be people you know telling you what to do. Now it's people you don't know telling you what to do because of social media and that sort of thing. And I think at some point you really need to dig down and connect with who you are and you know, your fealties to yourself and what you want. It's up to you to create a meaningful life for yourself. And, you know, different people are going to have different levels of restriction in their lives, and that has always been the case. But these stories show that restriction does not have to be, you know, doom. Mm-hmm. If you are true to yourself, it sounds old-fashioned, but, you know, some things about the human condition don't change. And it is more important that you live a meaningful life to you and make it as happy as you possibly can. That is more important than anything as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So, yeah, it sounds like there was some advice there or maybe some direction, and I think that's nice for people to hear. So can you believe, like, the hour just flew by? We've almost spoke for an hour now.
Wow.
Let's get your, so people can get everything I hope for on Amazon. Do you want to give your website all that information?
Yeah. If you just Google my name, my website will come up and all my social media will come up. And my books are available on Amazon and also from my publisher, Grey Goose Press. So just greygoosepress.com. will take you to, the last two. And then This Godforsaken Place is also available on Amazon. It's a different publisher, but you would still find it on Amazon.
Okay, that's Cinda Gault, spelled Gault, and Cinda Cinda. Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I think that it's important work that people are doing. I think it's needed, and it's about time. I think I wish it was done 50 years ago, and women could have had their power longer, but I'm glad it's happening now. But thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been delightful meeting you and your two ghosts on either side of you.
Yes, Howie and well,
the question is, which is the angel, which is the devil? We're on
I know, on a different shoulder.
Well, thank you so much. If you guys would like to get involved, go to spirittalkshow.com and have a good night. Say good night, Howie.
Good night, Cinda. Thanks for coming.
Good night, Russ.
Good night, Cinda.
Okay, thank you.
Good night. Pleasure to meet you.
Thanks for spending time with us. Now go make a story worth telling.